You go up there, it's a ghost town.
I was actually just there.
Go walk around the Capitol complex.
Did, yeah.
It's not packed out like it used to be. It's not the
Well, I
same.
don't know how it used to be.
It's a ghost town. It's empty because they're all home.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Folks, you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. I am joined now by Dale Jackson, host of The Dale Jackson Show on WVNN. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
I'm thrilled to be here.
All
thrilled
right.
to be here. We've been working together for a long time, and this is the first time you've ever asked me to be on your show.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is. It is.
My father-in-law asked me if I ever have people on the show that disagree with me, and sometimes I do, but it's not often, partially because, you know, we're on a conservative radio show, so they get on a conservative radio station, so they get the conservative stuff like, you know, 24 or 23-6, right? So
Right, right. That's exactly right. And you know, we already have our interaction on my show every week.
Right.
We have a conversation, so I think that's good too. But.
Yeah, but this is going to be online only. We'll mention it on the show and tell folks if they want to listen to the full conversation, they can find it online. But this will be online only, and coming out either the 28th or the 4th. So not sure when that will be. But you know, I wanted to start with, like, I guess a little bit of your kind of journey to being interested in politics and being so active, because I don't hear you talk about kind of why you are the way you are much on the radio.
People ask that question.
And, you know, like right now, it makes sense, right? Like that. I mean, you're a proper capitalist. Like you own properties, landlord, and everything like that. So so it makes sense, right? All that stuff is good for you. But I don't think it was always that way, right?
No.
So what was your family like politically?
Well, being a 45-year-old talk show host makes a lot more sense than being a 25-year-old conservative talk show host. And I was a 25-year-old conservative talk show host. I grew up in a middle-class family. My dad was a postman. My mom was
a letter carrier,
a teacher. Yep. Now
wow.
he left that early on, and you guys you may have heard me talk about my dad. I openly refer to him as a deadbeat dad. Went to jail for not paying child support. He was that guy. He loved us. He was a good dad. He was a nice dad. You know, all those things. I would not criticize his parenting, but I would criticize his or the raising of his children. Let's put it that way a little bit, and how he did that. And I think a lot of that has guided me throughout my life a little bit, especially with my son, who's now 6 years old. But they got divorced when I was, I think, 6, roughly, when that happened. And I was attending a Catholic school at the time. My mother could no longer afford it, so off we went to the public school. I was a bad student. My mom was a single mom. She was a teacher. I would skip school all the time. She was a teacher. She knew immediately, and I didn't care. And I was kind of a little bit of a hellraiser, but not like a criminal hellraiser. I was more of like a get in trouble around the neighborhood, don't listen to your mom sort of stuff like that. That's who I was. Skip school. My grades were okay until my high school career, where I graduated with a 1.7 GPA, but that was because I had skipped a ton of days my last semester, 2 semesters of the last year, because I'd already had all my credits. So I was just like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not going to college. I'm not doing any of this stuff. So I really wasn't going anywhere. I joined the Army when I was 17, but I didn't go until I was 18. So I already knew where I was going. So I checked out of education completely, and I was just done. I was working at McDonald's, managing at McDonald's. I was doing all these different things. So I joined the Army. I was in the Army for 4 years. Had a great time there. It was fun. I progressed through the ranks. I was a sergeant by the time I got out. So I started going to school. And when I was 21, I started going to college, and it was awesome. I just absolutely loved it. I was older than everyone else. So, I mean, that was just different perspective. I had different work ethics than everybody else. So I was ahead of the curve there. Oddly enough, my GPA in college was like 3.7. So, it's like a very different situation, because I was far more grown up. The military saved my life. I mean, essentially, I can definitely look at that. How that plays into my political leanings, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I would say that my mother was a Republican when I was growing up. She's a left-wing liberal now, but I can point to the day that changed. My dad, I would say, was a relatively conservative guy before he died. I started my talk radio career when he was still alive, and we'd talk about politics, and we generally agreed on almost everything. He was a Vietnam vet, so he was a little sour about the military when I joined and all these things. So a little weird situation there. My first presidential vote was for George W. Bush. And then 9/11 happened relatively shortly after that. I got out of the military about 14 days before 9/11. I thought I was going back, never did. And that, I think, shaped my worldview a little bit, too. I became a big Bill O'Reilly fan, which I don't think many 23-year-olds or whatever are going to be talking about that. I mean, me and Bill, I guess I was 22 at the time when that happened, because he took down the United Way. I mean, for lack of a better way to put it, there was a big controversy over, they were collecting money for 9/11, and they were like, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to build some blood banks. And everyone's like, that's not why we gave you money. You know, we gave you money for the families and all this other stuff. So they went out, and Bill O'Reilly literally took them down. I mean, for lack of a better way to put it. So, I mean, in college, I was, walking around, I had a no spin shirt on. Like that's kind of nerd I was. Yeah. So that sort of got me interested in politics. I mean, I'm the guy who after 9/11 sat on the couch for 2 weeks and watched the news. I mean, that I think really shaped my worldview too.
So so
I know I gave you a lot.
Yeah, no. Like growing up, I guess your family wasn't just terribly political.
Not at all.
They were. That's my family was pretty similar. There, as far as not being super political, my family was very religious, and so they're like conservative culturally, but they really don't care much about the economics.
It just wasn't
stuff.
a thing. It was not a thing. I remember listening to Rush Limbaugh, while I was in the parking lot, like at the grocery store, when my mom went into the grocery store, and I'd flip around on the radio and hear Rush Limbaugh, and I thought he was funny. Like that because he did talk radio different. I didn't know talk radio at all at the time, but I just thought that it wasn't like it's appointment listening. I was just happened to be in the car at that time, and I'd put it on whenever it was. But there was no, we're Republicans in this house or anything like that. We went to church. We did that, but there was no very political conversation. I'd watch election results with my mom. I remember doing that, but I don't remember that. The Gulf War, I think that was a pivotal moment in a lot of people's lives. I remember that. But there just was not an overtly political part of my life until I got into it.
When you started getting into it, was there ever like a concerted kind of trying to make your mind up about kind of your first principles or like what policies made sense? Because like for me, because my family wasn't political, in 2016 was the first time that I voted, and I felt like I knew that I was going to vote in the Republican primary at the time, right? And so, but I also knew that I did not know much about politics at all. And so I wanted to try to learn more about, and like, I read Thomas Sowell, I read Hayek, I read Friedman, I read Chomsky, I read, I tried to figure out like who's the best conservative people, who's the best liberal people, who's the best left-wing people, and try to figure out, and like basically every time every time I came to kind of a decision point, I ended up being more or less on the left. I mean, funny enough, I voted in 2016 for Bernie Sanders while still thinking Black Lives Matter was like a terrorist organization.
Wow.
And so, but that's because I cared about the economic stuff.
You're an economic liberal.
Yeah.
You may be a social liberal too, but you're mostly an economic
liberal. Yeah, at this point now, I'm like libertine socially. I'm like, you do whatever you want to do. I don't care. It doesn't bother me. But even in 20, and that's the thing that frustrates me about the right wing populism, is because they say they care about the economic stuff, but then they're willing to sacrifice the economic stuff for people who don't care about that and who do all the conservative social stuff. So, but there wasn't any of that like concerted, like, no. I want to try to figure out.
Well, I don't believe I fit into like the neat conservative box. As much as I may frustrate people who are liberal, I often frustrate people who are conservative as well. I mean, you can go back to the Donald Trump years, the first round, and right. I mean, my audience and I were very very much at odds during the 2015 election or 2016 election. But when it started in 2015, I was like, Trump, really? Like, this is the guy? I mean, this is the guy you want. And I had a lot of problems with that. I also had a lot of problems with my audience over issues like gay marriage and things like this. I was pro-gay marriage before Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were pretending to try to figure out what they believe. I mean, to believe that a 70-year-old man changed his position on gay marriage is laughable.
Right.
So they're changing it because of politics, and
which is what Trump did too on the abortion thing.
Well, I think Trump had a different. I think Trump had a very different turn towards conservatism. I think a lot of it had to do with, one, who was attacking him. I think that really had a lot to do with it. Two, I think it was less ideological. Other than, I think things change in his life, and I think that I think that's a big part of it as well. As he got older, had kids, his kids got older, things like that. Do I believe he believes all the stuff he's saying about abortion and stuff like this? He and I think are probably on the same page on abortion, where I think that it should probably be legal. It should be incredibly rare. Me and Hillary Clinton are apparently on the same page on that too. Used to be, but she's gone pretty far on that. But the state should be able to decide. If New York wants to have a vile policy that says abortion up to birth, and we are not even going to pretend that we're going to maybe put a restriction on that says 8 months or whatever. If they want to do that and not have that, fine, they should be able to do that. But if Alabama says we're not going to allow any abortions, not even rape and incest and things like that, I don't agree with either of those positions. But I think those states should be allowed to decide where they are. For me personally, I think abortion should be legal. I think they should be super rare. And I think this idea that it should go on for 40 weeks or whatever, crazy. I mean, it should be 20 weeks or something along that lines. But the people who want no restrictions want no restrictions at all, and the people that want no abortions want no abortions also. So basically what you have is you're either going to have them forever, no matter what, or you're going to have none, and there's no middle ground there. So anyway, on the social issues, I frustrate my audience, I think, a lot on that. On the fiscal policy, I'm generally more conservative, but I can tell you, Trump, I think, has changed a lot of minds, and we've talked about this a lot on the economic side too, because they've gone from free trade no matter what. If they're hiring 9-year-olds to dig mines somewhere, who cares? It's the free market. Let them send their stuff over here. We'll buy it. And if it's cheaper, we'll export. This is the idea. We'll export freedom around the world and ideas, and we'll send them movies, and they'll send us cheap products. Right. And we'll change their culture, and our economy will be better because of it, because Americans will be able to buy cheaper stuff. But now I think a lot of people have sort of gotten to what would be considered a more liberal position of, well, they're eating our lunch. So you put tariffs on Mexico or put tariffs on Canada or whatever, and China, and you say, okay, maybe the free market isn't the right answer. Maybe fair trade. Kind of hear a differentiation between those things. So I can see how you can evolve on things. I don't see how you can just completely flip your positions. And I think Trump is also a guy who's willing to lie. I mean, we all know that. I mean, he's one of the ones, but with him, it's so brazen. And in the last couple of elections we've had, everyone involved has been a liar. Joe Biden's the worst liar in American history. I'm not saying he's the biggest liar in American history. He's the worst. He's terrible at it. He's terrible at it. Kamala Harris is a liar as well, but she's just bad at everything. She's bad at talking. She's bad at thinking. She's bad at laughing. She's bad at walking. She's just bad at absolutely everything. Hillary Clinton, another one, just an out-and-out liar. Everybody knows it, but she's good at it. Donald Trump is a bullshitter, and bullshitters can lie and stuff like this. And in my house with Cindy, my wife, and Grant will constantly say, "Daddy lies all the time." and I say to him, and really, I'm not lying to my son. I'm bullshitting my son, for lack of a better way to do it. Like, I'll tease him, or I'll make up a story, and I'll say all these things. And we have a thing in my house where it's like, who did this? Like, who moved this? And I'll be like, oh, Barack Obama did that. Now, my son has no idea who Barack Obama is. He's 6 years old, but he knows Barack Obama was president. He knows Barack Obama didn't do that. Am I lying to him? No, I'm bullshitting him and joking with him. Trump, I think his entire life is that. Like, he's BSing his way through a lot of situations in the business world, and he's taking that into politics.
Well, and since we're talking about the national stuff, I think we'll get to that first. But before we do that, and then I also want to talk to you about the Alabama legislative session and what you're hearing. Sure. But before we do that, I want to go back to, I guess, trying to figure out, like, what was it that convinced you on the economic stuff?
This is the thing, when you were rattling off all the stuff you were reading and all these other things, I hate to say this because it makes me sound dumb, but I'm just going to say this right now. I didn't have that awakening. Mine was just living life, like and what I thought about things and how I learned about things as I go. I wish I was well read. I can honestly tell you I'm not. I'm just someone that consumes a lot of media, a lot of news, a lot of everything before everything went online. I was a guy who read a lot of newspapers. I did all that stuff. I do a lot of history stuff. I mean, my son's named after Ulysses S. Grant. I'm a history guy. I like that kind of stuff. But have I sat down and read a billion books? No. How did I get to my economic perspective? I don't know. If you want me to tell you the truth of that, I'm a believer that we should give people the opportunity to spend their own money the way that they want to spend their own money. And if the government wants to spend their money, then get people to vote on it and do it. If you want to raise taxes $500 on every American, just a one-time tax, then go get someone to vote for that and come out and have an election about it. And if you win, fine. And go out and do just like Kamala Harris. If Kamala Harris won and she went into office and said, I want to raise taxes on billionaires, how could anyone say, oh, no, you can't do that? No, that was what the election was about. She made that point. It's like the immigration thing. Donald Trump said, I'm going to build a wall. I'm going to put immigrants out. Now, when he starts doing it, we all can't go, oh, my God, I can't believe he's doing this.
Right.
So I can't give you a pinpoint moment in time or anything like that. I believe in free markets. I believe in fair markets. I guess it would be the transition to where everyone's heading. And I just think people should have an opportunity to spend their own money, to make their own money, and be as free as they possibly can without a government saying, I don't like that.
So, and on the economic stuff, I mean, we can, but on the economic stuff, my perspective is, I could phrase my economic perspective very similarly in that I want people to be free, and I don't think people are free when they are coerced by private actors in the same way that they're not free when they're coerced by government actors. Like, I care about, I think you are unfree if you don't if you don't have access to, a good paying job that provides you with the opportunity to have good health care or
those jobs
be able
exist.
To right not a lot of them are bad, right?
Well, not everyone's going to have that access to that high
and I think you are benefits. And I think that you are unfree when an employer can fire you for any reason or no reason at all.
Well, where's their freedom in that situation?
Their freedom is that they have somebody who is willing to make profit for them.
From their free will to go work for that company, and then they have the freedom to fire them for any reason they want to.
Right.
Now,
I think that when you have, generally, you have less employers than employees, and so restricting, so there's always a balance, right? By giving some people freedom, in a lot of cases, you're taking some freedom away from others.
But you're redefining freedom in that situation. Well,
you're not.
Yeah, you are. You're saying you're not free if you don't have a full-time job and free and paid health care and all these other things. That's a redefinition of the word freedom, in my opinion. You may disagree, but that is not what freedom is. Freedom is the ability to say, I'm not going to do this. And here's the truth. Yes, there are low-paying jobs that are for low-skilled workers that pay very little, that provide very little benefit to those people, and they're not supposed to be full-time jobs. So some people treat them as them. Some people are going to do those jobs for the rest. There's going to be the 65-year-old guy who's working at McDonald's for his whole life, who goes on the news and says, "I'm making $12 an hour, and I've been here 20 years. Okay, well, what? Just because he's been there 20 years, he's not putting in any more input into that system than what he was doing 15 years ago if he's still cooking fries every single day. He's not putting any more in. So it doesn't necessarily mean he's worth more to the employer. I'm in a management position at my radio station. I hear people all the time say, well, I need a raise because, and then the next thing they say is because I have a kid or because I have a house or because I have all these things, to which I say, well, I'm sympathetic to that. But that does not change your input into this business in any way, shape, or form. You're not changing anything about what you're producing because you went and had a kid. And so your value to the company does not go up whether you have 1, 2, 4, 6, or whatever kids. That just doesn't work that way. The government works that way. If I get married when I'm in the Army, they give me more money. If I live off base when I'm in the Army, they give me more money. If I have more kids, they will give me more money if I'm on government assistance and stuff like this. But that doesn't work. If I have 0 kids, and no wife, or a wife and 9 kids,
Well,
my value to my employer is exactly the same. You are taking the more, I would say, Pollyannish view that, well, the employer should look at them and go, well, this guy has 3 kids and this guy has 0 kids. So if I have layoffs, I'm firing this guy regardless of the input, and that's not going to happen.
Well, I don't know that I would exactly say that, but I would say that I don't think that I'm actually redefining freedom. I think that when people think of what does it mean to be free, they think of the what it means to feel free is that you are able to move through the world in like the way that you want.
That's emotion. You're talking about you're talking like a feeling of freedom as opposed to what freedom actually is. Freedom is the ability to do what you want to do without a tyrannical government stepping down upon you. That's what it is. It's not necessarily free to tell this. Freedom does not mean that an employer is told you'll do this, so this person lives this way. And also,
the employer is given the opportunity to exist in a society, right? I mean, corporations are not naturally occurring phenomenons. We as a society protect them and allow them to exist
and provide benefits to them for existing. I mean, look at Alabama. The reason, and for anyone watching outside of the state, the reason why Alabama has had a pretty good run at picking up businesses and them moving here, it's not because of our super educated workforce.
Right, we're throwing money at them.
Well, but see, I think that's a misnomer too, or a misstatement as well. They're not throwing money at them. Mostly what they're saying, there's some money involved. I'm not gonna say there's not. But mostly what they're doing is they're saying, if you come and take this plot of land that's doing nothing and you start creating widgets on this land, we're gonna waive the normal taxes for payroll taxes and all this other stuff for jobs that would be created there that would not exist otherwise. If we kept an empty plot of land, it's generating $0 in tax revenue. Now you've come in and you've created 100 jobs on this plot of land. We're still going to take $0 in tax revenue, but you're going to pay these individuals X amount of money, and those individuals are going to go out and they're going to do this, and the money will recycle through the economy. So you're not really throwing money at them per se. What you're saying is we're going to give you a better opportunity and some incentives to come here, but you're going to have to generate stuff for those incentives to be worth anything. If you don't hire any employees, then there's no benefit. Yes, they'll come and they'll lay the utilities, and there are places all over the state of Alabama where there are buildings already built, and companies will come and say, "I need a place to go." And then they will the economic directors of the state will take those individuals around. Hey, do you see this building? Here's how large it is. Here's how it is. Boom, 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 boom. You can come here and set up. And if they do, there's economic incentives that go along with it. Now, that's not throwing money at them. And people going to work for them aren't giving up their freedom to do so. They're choosing their freedom to make that choice. And if enough people say, I'm not going to do that, then things have to change. And that's, and I know we're way off field here, but this is where you and I get sideways on illegal immigration. Because what happens is if enough people say, well, I'm not going to go do that, and they say, oh, yeah, well, what if we bring in some third world labor that's going to do it for less? Who's getting hurt in that situation? The answer is everybody. The third world labor is getting hurt. The worker that was there is getting hurt, and the employer is benefiting from it. So I think we'd probably agree on that last part. Yeah. We'd probably disagree on some of the other parts of that. But just to say that you don't have freedom if you don't have health insurance is a redefinition of what the term is.
There's not, in the same way that corporations are not naturally occurring entities, freedom is not something that is defined.
That's
like
incorrect.
That we can.
Freedom comes from the divine. That's the truth. It's in the Constitution. The Constitutional perspective.
Well, the Constitution is also not a naturally occurring document. I mean, we as a people, like. We as people get to define, and also I think that I do not believe that when people think about what it means to be free, they only think about or they only think about being free from government coercion. I think that they do generally. If you go to people and you ask them what does it mean to be free, I think generally you are going to get answers that look something like, I am able to kind of move through the world with very few without hindrances, without other people encumbering me with other things.
They're wrong.
Right?
What they're saying about freedom is wrong. I mean, that the idea that my freedom is at risk if an employer isn't forced to X, Y, and Z. I don't believe that.
Well, and also because as an employee, as a person who works for a living, there are only so many options, and so like if you were stranded on an island and the only source of food was coconuts, and somebody else got there first and they got all the coconuts, and then they said, well, here, you can be my slave and I'll feed you, or you could not and die. Like, technically there's no government coercion there on the island, right?
Put your life at risk and that, by the governing entity, which is that guy. So yes, there is.
I mean,
that's an extreme example, and
it's an extreme example because typically, when you're doing parables or something, you're using extreme examples to illustrate.
It's not a good parable. They shows up and they share the coconuts.
Yeah. Well, that would be good. That would be good
for this story. It's not a good parable, but I get where you're going with this. But my point remains. When we talk about freedom and then we start saying healthcare is free, like, I'm not free because I can't go get an abortion. What are you talking about?
That does make you less free.
It doesn't make you less free.
Obviously, it does.
No, it doesn't. Because
the government is saying that you cannot terminate this pregnancy. And it like, I am in a certain societally, we are more free because murder is wrong. Murder is illegal, sure. Right? But it is a restriction on my individual liberty that the government will coerce me into into prison if I am not allowed to murder you.
It's
right.
That's a right to life.
Right.
A right to
yes.
life,
Exactly.
Liberty.
Yes. You have
and if that's your argument, then abortion should be illegal because there is a right to life.
No, I'm just illustrating that.
But if you're talking about murder.
Yeah, exactly. Murder is wrong, and societally that makes us more free, and it makes the potential victims of murder
you're guaranteed
more free.
A right to life.
Yes, but let's say
not
if I were somebody,
you want, you're guaranteed a right to life.
I'm not. I'm trying to illustrate. The kind of dynamics of restricting freedom. I'm saying that. Obviously, it's good that murder is wrong, and it makes us societally more free. It makes the potential victims of murder more free. But in a sense, and in a very real sense, for somebody who wants to murder people, they have their liberty restricted. Right?
I just want to make sure that you're making this argument about abortion.
No, I'm just making it generally. And so if we're talking about abortion, if I'm a woman, I have less freedom because I'm not able to terminate my pregnancy in the first trimester or something.
I can't go get an abortion either. I mean, it's less. There's no less freedom. They have the same amount of freedom as everybody else. The right to do something to yourself. Yeah, fine. You want to go get an abortion, but that's not just yourself. The argument of the people who make those laws and who disagree, the pro-life individuals.
Yes, they're saying that the right of the fetus, the entity inside the person, overwrites the right to
life, which is specifically laid out. The right to life.
Yes, and I'm saying that, like, I'm just saying that. I disagree with the people who say that the rights of the fetus or the entity inside of the woman should override the rights of the woman. I disagree with that, but we just need to recognize what that is. You say that not being able to get an abortion is not a restriction on a woman's freedom, and it just very clearly is.
There's no right to an abortion. There's no such thing as a right to an abortion. It doesn't exist. It's a made-up thing. And look, we can assign rights.
Yes, exactly. And we have, and we had one for 50 years.
No, that right was never assigned. It was bad law. It was bad case law. But it should have been overturned immediately, and instead it was overturned years later.
I know, but it was a right that existed that we assigned. You can say that as opposed to all of the other rights that we found in nature or were divine and all of this kind of stuff, and this one was just cooked up by people, but we had it. And now we don't.
But it was cooked up by people. And
okay, that's fine. I'm fine with that.
Right. And under that premise, people took it away.
Exactly. Okay, so there we go. So then we agree.
It's no longer a right that exists.
We
it's
agree.
Not a
so
right.
women are less free in Alabama than they were.
The argument is that it's never been a right. It's not a right.
Well, that is factually wrong. You were talking to me about what's.
How's that factually wrong?
Because a year ago or 2 years ago, women in Alabama had the freedom to get an abortion, and now they don't. Like I don't know why. That it's like kind of strange that you're like kind of because we're not arguing about. Is it good or is it bad? We're just like now kind of arguing about the.
We both agree it's bad, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we both agree that abortions are bad.
Yeah,
right.
And so I'm just stating 2 years ago they had the right to do that, and now they don't.
But again, it was incorrectly created by a court ruling that was based on flawed logic, and that's taught in classes all over this country, and people say, well, yeah, it was incorrectly decided, but it's still very good. Well, no, hold on, that's not how it works. They're not supposed to be making law from the Supreme Court. They're supposed to be making law from Congress, and Congress should have come in over the last 50 years and figured this out. They should have came in, and the right thing to do was say, okay, we're going to provide that you cannot outlaw abortion nationwide under 18 weeks. That's what we're going to do, and that could have been the end of it. But the side that wanted no restrictions refused that. And across the country, you saw 13, 16, 18 weeks. And I guarantee you go up there and you try to pass an 18-week ban or an 18-week law, and the left gets behind it 20 years ago, we're not having any of this conversation. But there was no restrictions are okay. You can't even get major presidential candidates on the left who are trying to appeal to the most amount of people as they possibly can to answer the following question. When should we start restricting abortions? Mm-hmm. And they will say, well, there should be no restriction. And then you say, 8 months and 28 days? Mm-hmm. And they will say, well, there should be no restriction. We should talk to the doctor. And for 65, 70% of people, that's an insane thing to say because nobody believes that people should have elective abortions at 8 months and 28 days. But because of the cowardice of this conversation and the people having it, they refuse to say anything because there are people who will be furious, a very small group of people that will be furious about this. You will have people on the other side who say, well, when should we restrict abortions? And then they'll say 13, 16, 18, 20, 23 weeks. You'll hear all those other things. And there are people who say never. But you'll get a straight answer out of that question. If you ask me when, I would say roughly 20 weeks. But I could be convinced a couple weeks either way, depending on what you want to tell me. But the idea... And then I know we're way off track again. Yeah. but the issue that abortion is a right is just technically incorrect. It's not a right.
It was. Now it's not.
Well, it was wrongly decided, so it was incorrect. It's been overturned, so it should not have been. So all those abortions
shouldn't have been, but it was.
They have to go have all those babies now.
Sure.
They have to go back and have all the babies.
The only reason I got distracted on that because I was just very confused about the factual kind of state of the fact of the matter question about freedom of women in Alabama. But so we both made our cases there.
They have the freedom to leave.
Not if Steve Marshall has anything to say about it.
And when that case goes up, he should get blown up. Okay, so I don't mean blown up in the sense that like a liberal goes out and blows up the legislature. What I mean is the case should get blown up legally.
Well, I hope it does.
You know what? You know what's funny? You laugh about that. You and I know that story, but I guarantee you a good number of people have no idea that someone tried to blow up the Attorney General's office with a nail bomb.
Yep. Well. So there we go. Metaphorically, Dale Jackson wants to blow up Steve Marshall.
There's your take. Pull that out, put that in a tweet. There we go.
Okay, so Trump administration. What are you expecting to happen over the next 4 years? Because I do not know how seriously to take a lot of the things that are being proposed, because in the first Trump administration, generally speaking, just not much was accomplished. He gave a tax cut, 80% of it went to the wealthy people. There were a couple of things here and there. There was a little bit more restrictions around.
Correct, yes.
on the tax cut thing?
Yeah, the 80% went to the wealthy people. It went to taxpayers, and it's not as if the suggestion there is that 80% of the people who got tax cuts were wealthy. What actually happened is
80% of the dollars from the tax cuts
because
went
they
to the
pay
wealthy.
significantly more in taxes.
No.
There's more to.
It's not factually incorrect. It's just you don't like how I'm framing.
Okay, well, whatever you want to call it, but
is it or is it not true that there were $2 trillion in tax cuts and 80% of that $2 trillion went to the wealthy?
Yes, but the way you framed it was disingenuous.
Well, it's not. Did 80% of the benefit of 80% of that $2 trillion go
it went to the
wealthy?
people who paid taxes? You can't
80%
give
of
a
those
tax
dollars
cut to people that don't pay taxes.
Well,
you can give them free money. You give them free money,
or you could only give a tax cut to people who make less than $400,000 a year.
But the purpose of the entire thing is to generate money. And
we can argue about the purpose, whether the purpose was right, but 80% of the money went to wealthy people.
But it's a miscommunication of
it's not a miscommunication. There were $2 trillion that were allocated.
It's a misleading
and
stat.
80% of that went to wealthy people.
It's a misleading stat.
Did that happen or not?
I mean, you can yes.
Okay.
But again,
it's
a misleading stat. That's what I'm saying.
Well, you want to lead people. You want to lead people somewhere where they don't realize that 80% of that monies that was not collected went to the wealthy people. Okay.
Yeah, okay. The people who pay the taxes.
Factually, what I said was correct. We both agree. Okay. So that happened. That was kind of like the big thing.
Yeah.
And then there was a little bit more restriction around immigration, and there wasn't much else. And there was also a lot of this bluster in the first administration. Not as much, I don't think. I think there's more bluster. But now, I mean, we've got the Doge thing as somebody who's a member of the American Federation of Government Employees.
But you one thing. You missed another one of the biggest things he did in the first administration. He remade the courts.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's true.
He remade the Supreme Court, which is great for people like me who you probably don't like it. But he also remade all the lower courts too. And now with the second term, he's gonna do it more. It's gonna move further that way. So that's the biggest thing he did.
Right, and now they're potentially going to find the NLRA unconstitutional and send us back to the labor law regime pre-1930s.
Kids in coal mines. It's gonna be absolutely horrific. And
you say that as a joke, but in Indiana, there literally were Republicans who put forward a child labor bill to allow 13-year-olds in coal mines.
To let people work younger. That's what it said.
No, in coal mines. Literally,
I'm not debating that. But what I'm saying is, again, you can say something that's accurate, but when you say it that way, it's misleading. If you argue it's a child labor law, everyone who hears that word thinks that it's like, oh, let's shove these kids in the coal mines, take them out of school, and tell them they can't work. That's not what it is.
No.
It gives them the opportunity, if they want to do it,
to go work in the coal mines.
They can go work in the coal mines. Not something I want my son doing.
The reason that I say Indiana specifically is because, like in Alabama,
there are multiple states that were trying to do something.
Well, no,
like that.
Indiana was specifically, they lifted the hazardous occupation rules against, and like specifically they were like, if kids want to go in coal mines, they can. Like that was the law. As opposed to retaining the hazardous occupations but allowing 13-year-olds to go work at like, Ben and Jerry's or something. That's not what was going on. They were lifting hazardous occupation thing. But
I wouldn't do that if I was a member of the legislature. Right.
Fortunately, they ended up not doing that. But yeah, and so this Doge thing is 50% headcount reduction. I mean, I saw Dale Strong posting about I'm with Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm super excited about that. If they were able to accomplish their goals, Huntsville would go through a worse than Great Recession level economic downturn.
If they went and flipped a coin or they drew a number and they said odds or evens or whatever and fired everyone with even Social Security numbers.
Which is what they said they wanted.
Which is what they said.
Yeah.
Which is why, again, I'm the guy who goes on there and says, that's stupid. Okay, that's a stupid thing.
And so how serious should I, when they're going around and saying all of these things.
They're blustering. They're bullshitting.
Well, then it's so, So I want to give it to you to tell me what you expect to happen, and
I expect them to come. I expect them to come up with a list of massive cuts. And cuts across different agencies and things like that. They'll come up with, why are they having shrimp run on treadmills and monitoring what happens to them? Cut that out. Okay, boom, $10 million gone. I expect that stuff to come up. But that's little penny ante stuff and nonsense. I think they will come up with big swipes at different government agencies and things like that. And then they will take it before Congress, and Congress will be like, nah. No, I mean that's what I think is going to happen. They're going to come with big swings. They'll get some of them, but they will mostly miss. This idea that they're going to fire the federal workforce is idiotic and moronic, and you're not going to do that. What you do, if you want to cut the federal workforce, you say, okay, all the jobs that aren't filled right now, stop. Let's pause. Let's figure out what's going on, figure out who we need, what we need, and go from there. You're not going to fire. And this is, I'm criticizing them. So I'm with you on this. You don't tell an entire workforce that, hey, half of you don't matter. Okay. You just don't do that because it's A, it's not true.
Right.
I mean, that's number one. And B, there's no way with the way the current federal government is set up that you could even do this if you wanted to. So it's just completely nuts. Now, when they say make people go back to work and all these other things, that's within their power. I have absolutely no problem with them making my wife leave my house and go to work. I mean, I have no problem with that. I'm fine with that. I work from home too, so I'm a hypocrite in this situation. I work in the private sector. I do work from home. But to think that we've got buildings in Washington, D.C., and by the way, this is the fault of the bureaucratic class and the liberal elites, because for some reason, they don't understand how this stuff looks to real human beings. It's like when you tell me, oh, maybe we should have more drag queens in schools. And everyone goes, well, you shouldn't have no drag queens in schools. I'm like, no, you should have no drag queens in schools. And that's a very general position. But if you refuse to say that and own that, you look crazy. If you say that you don't need to go to work 4 years after COVID, you look crazy to normal people. So this is the pendulum swinging back the other way. And people are going, well, if they don't need to be at work, then maybe they don't need to be. And that's where we're at. But,
and so you think that the job cuts probably not happen, but very possibly we see a dramatic reduction in telework.
Get your ass back to work. I mean,
well,
that's,
that is, but I mean, that
you can't trust
silly though, right?
I said this. I did not want to go home during the pandemic. You may remember this. We knew each other then. I did not want to go home during the pandemic. I wanted to work from the studio. I wanted to stay there. Now I'm never going back if I don't have to. Okay, that's so I'm a hypocrite. But this is what I told my boss. I said, if you can't trust them to work from home, then you can't trust them.
Right.
And then I believe that. But there are certain jobs where you need to be in the same place. Right. And you need to be in the same place. And I've talked to enough government employees. I'm married to a government employee. I know damn well, just like I'll use the Los Angeles school system as an example. Just bear with me here for a second. They had kids who took laptops home who never logged in throughout the entire pandemic. Kids that never logged in, that graduated. Kids that never logged in, that got grades. So there is something to be said for the idea that you've got to get these people in the same room.
Well, I mean, 14-year-olds...
I'm using that as an example. I'm telling you, it's happening in the federal government as well. There are people who are doing nothing.
That's
it's a management problem. I agree with that.
Exactly.
But the management's the problem. I mean, you have that as a problem as well. You have to acknowledge that. Look, here's what it is. If a guy who has the ability to fund your business is telling you need to get your employees back to work, and you say, well, but nah, that's a really stupid thing to do.
The problem is that I think there's a lot of just people are being given the wrong impression about the extent of telework in the federal government. I mean, like Joni Ernst,
they're completely empty.
Sure, but
like 4% occupancy, and they're all janitors.
Yeah, well, 4% occupancy. I don't know about the buildings in D.C., and I think some of them, like they're.
By the way, that's all they're talking about. They're not talking about Redstone Arsenal. They're talking about D.C., but it's going to have a ripple effect everywhere.
They like Joni Ernst is saying 6% of federal workers are on the job every day.
She's talking about D.C.
Well, that's just not true.
But she's talking about D.C. That's what she's talking about.
Well,
their offices are empty. That's what she's talking about.
Well, that's not what. When people hear federal employees, they're
right. It's just like when someone says 80% of the money went to the top and 20% went elsewhere. There's technically correct, but it's not the whole story. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm going to bring it back, but I'm telling you, that's exactly the same thing. You're right about that. She's talking about Washington, D.C., and she's making comments to the media. And instead,
here's my friend.
Hold on.
Okay.
And here's the thing. And when you're making these statements to the media, you can't say, footnote, I'm speaking about Washington, D.C. only and things like that. You can't do that. So you're speaking in broad terms, and you got to narrow this down. But like I said, this is a D.C. problem because D.C. is a ghost town now. You go up there, it's a ghost town. During Monday through Friday, it's a ghost town.
I was actually just there.
Go walk around the Capitol complex.
Yeah.
It's not packed out like it used to be. It's not the same.
I don't know how it used to be. I've only ever been to D.C. since 2020, but I've
it's
been
a ghost
multiple
town.
times. But the like.
And by the way, if you're up there, if
my,
you're at the Capitol complex, like you're in, like if you're in that part, that's where all the action is. When we're talking about where the worker bees are doing their work, it's empty because they're all home.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
Here's my frustration. I have listened to multiple full congressional hearings about telework, trying to find. I know. And trying to find where Robert Adderholt or Gary Palmer or any of these are people that I know have been a part of the kind of attempting to paint a picture in Alabama. And I have been trying to find them pointing to anything showing that there is a productivity or mission success problem among the group of federal employees who are working from home. And I've listened to like half a dozen of these. I have not heard.
They haven't cited it.
I have not heard one statistic about productivity or mission success from anybody. I've heard, occupancy, building occupancy, people are working at home, blah, 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 blah. I've heard all of those stats.
Facts.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are, sure. Maybe it's,
you did this whole thing, and that makes it seem like it's bullshit, but it's not.
Well, yeah, but what people care about is the mission succeeding?
Right.
Are people accomplishing the things that are civil servants serving the civilian population?
Let me ask a question. Why do you care? Like, this is a serious question.
Well, because I care about workers.
Hear me out. I had a conversation with my boss 2 weeks ago. Took on a new responsibility. And I said to him, I don't want to come back to the office. I said, my life is better not going back to the office. My life, my personal time, my kids up. I don't have to drive. I don't have to do any of those things. So I get this.
Yeah.
But again,
I think it's bad to, for no reason at all, make hundreds of thousands of people's lives worse.
That's that's conjecture on your part of what that is. And you're right. I think they should explain. But only in this world we're talking about right now do you have to explain to your employees why you think they should do something, and they can go, nah. I mean, that's the situation we're in. And I know I keep using that, but that's what they're saying. They bring these agency heads before Congress. And they say the taxpayers are paying you. We're the oversight.
Yeah,
of those.
and then the agencies heads. Well, no, the agency heads give statistics about how the productivity is actually, in many cases, higher than it was, and the mission we are reaching mission success. In some cases, at a better rate, at a higher rate than we were prior, because our employees are able to do as much, or in some cases more, at home than they were in the office. More.
I'll tell you what happens when you work from home. Because I'm one of these guys.
Exactly. And so why should we allow these people to, again, for no, look, I promise, if you came to me with data that said the Social Security Administration in 2020 went 100% telework during that time, and here into 2024, call resolution times are down. It takes longer to get a disability hearings.
Is that the data?
Blah, 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 blah. No, it's not.
Yeah.
The data is like the opposite, actually.
What's the data
So why would I stand for making the 100,000 or however many people that work at the Social Security Administration? Why would I agree to make their lives worse when they're continuing to perform?
I don't disagree with you. As I just said, it's a quality of life issue. If the job's getting done, they shouldn't be worried about that. But if they don't think the job's getting done, that's the problem. I mean, there are times when you'll call me at 9 o'clock at night. If I only worked from the office and didn't have a cell phone, then you can only talk to me between 9 and 5. And that's probably not going to work for the way you work and I work. So it's better that I have the ability to do stuff from home. Sometimes on a Friday night or a Saturday, you'll call me and say, hey, do this. I need that. What was it last week? Where you're like, hey, we're having a problem. Can you deal with it? So it's easier to do. All those things happen. I agree with you. I would not be as hard on this, get back to work thing if there's data that shows that they're more efficient. But I also know this for a fact. There are a lot of people, and they're gonna, and they're, like I said, it's one of these things where you're making it bad for everybody else. Where you have these federal workers showing themselves working from the bathtub and taking pictures and posting them online, and doing the day in the life of an employee. They do all these stupid things and end up getting fired. So I think the argument that you're making is a good one. It really is. Where it's like, look, if productivity's up at the Social Security agency, why do you want them back? Like, why do you want them back? I think that's a good question, and I think it's so dumb what we hear around here, where they're like, oh, well, you got to come back to the office 3 days a week. It's like, why? Like, what is the reason? If the reasoning is like some sort of a COVID protocol or something where we're only around each other 3 days, that's stupid. If it's for an actual reason, fine.
Well, what it was for, so I've just got a new job, but for the last 7 years I've worked at the Corps of Engineers.
Are you still in the union?
I am no longer represented. I'm still a member. I've retained my membership.
I was just joking. I thought you were going to say yes. All right.
Yeah, no, I've retained my. It's a fellowship, so it's a full-time job, but officially I'm like a independent contractor, basically. So. But and so we were in the office 2 days a week, and the reason was that so and I was a project manager, and so there is value, I think, and particularly in jobs like project management, where I need to go talk to my contracting officer, I need to go talk to my engineer, I need to go talk to the contract specialist, and maybe be able to go talk to my program manager. Like, there's value to
being able to walk down the hall.
I can walk down the hall.
Zoom call with me.
Exactly. There's some value to that, but like, you don't have to do it every day, and so you get the best of both worlds. You can have some amount of the flexibility for the 3 days a week that you're at home.
So it's a quality of life
everybody, yeah, exactly. It's a quality of life now at the Corps of Engineers. But everybody is in the office on those same 2 days, and so we can all go talk to each other.
You know what the easiest fix to this is? You're going to hate it. It's the free market. You know what those employees do? They say, fuck this. I'm not going back and doing this. I'm going to go ply my trade elsewhere.
Well, and that's part of the problem, and part of the reason that I am so frustrated about this, because I do think that if you do mass reductions of telework and in opportunities to telework at government agencies, it is going to harm those agencies' abilities to attract and retain talent, because they can go work for private sector employees. Actually,
so that's a win-win for everyone.
Well, no, it's not, because because it will make the government services worse, and it will decrease mission success at places like the Social Security Administration, which will then, the same people who cause the reduction in mission success, reduction in productivity, will then turn back around to the Social Security Administration and say, look at how bad the government is, let's privatize it.
Oh, wow. Okay, see, I have a hard time privatizing the Social Security Department.
Well,
but all right.
That's what some people want to do. Some people want to privatize, but so
the post office they want to privatize, yeah.
So, okay,
I want to see this data, though. I do. I'd like to see it, because I have not watched a bunch of telework committees. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. It's I don't know that I would go so far as to say it's interesting, but there hasn't been just a whole lot. There hasn't really.
So is your argument that they're just saying get them home from work? What? Because they're mean? What's their reason?
Yes, because they want to polarize.
Like, you think they're mean?
Well, I mean, that's a trivial way to put it, but yes, I think they want to polarize the general American public against government workers, because in an attempt to degrade the services.
I think
what
you're going to find is that there is a difference in data, and I think you're going to find that they have data that shows something different than what you're saying.
Well, they should show.
I agree with you.
They should bring it to these congressional hearings.
I'd love to hear.
Wasted my time.
I'd love to hear it, because
I promised. I've listened to like 6 of these.
I don't dispute it.
It's insane that they don't have anything. Like, it's just crazy to me. It's crazy. So what do you make of this? What do you make of the right-wing populist stuff and the Amazon at the 7 facilities that Teamsters have unionized? They've gone on strike. They've extended picket lines across the country. I actually just got back earlier today from the picket line in Huntsville, where the Teamsters had set up something to try to turn around union shipping companies. Yeah, when the companies that the Teamsters have unionized that work with Amazon, the Teamsters have it in their contract that Teamsters members don't have to cross picket lines. And so what would happen is that there would be a UPS truck or something, and it would turn around, and a supervisor would come back and drive it into the facility. So
that sounds so damn silly. It's like, I'm sorry, I can't go in there. Come here, supervisor. Okay, now we'll deliver the product. Okay, yeah.
Well,
okay.
Yeah. But so how is is Trump going to actually be a friend to Sean O'Brien after Sean O'Brien did him a solid, or is he going to be buddy with Jeff Bezos, who was at Mar-a-Lago last night?
Well, he met with I think Sean O'Brien at Mar-a-Lago too, not too long ago. So again, like I said, Donald Trump's talking to everybody, and everyone's talking to Donald Trump. So I think what he would prefer they do is figure it out on their own. And I think part of Donald Trump's effectiveness is this idea that if you don't fix this, I will. Like that sort of mentality. He's doing that with Russia and Ukraine. Either figure it out or I'm going to stop this. The Israelis and Hamas, they're saying, yeah, either get these hostages done or I'm going to step in and do something. Like this is like a way he's done things in the past where he says, resolve these issues or I will step in and do so. You have these things. Is he going to be effective in doing that? I don't know. But here's what Donald Trump was effective in doing. Because of that mentality, there was like a pause on the world stage. I mean, it really was. Like what we saw happening in 2015 before Donald Trump took office and what we saw happening in 2020 right before he left, the world was pretty much at the same state. Okay, there weren't more wars and all these other things happening. Donald Trump leaves, and off Russia goes into Ukraine. Donald Trump leaves, and then a couple years later, you got Iran screwing around with everything in the Middle East, which they weren't really doing when Trump was there. And Trump was killing their generals and doing these things. And there were launches against American bases and things like that as like token retaliation where Americans got hurt.
Well, and he did increase, Obama was kind of, I don't follow the foreign policy stuff very much, but Obama was by the left always criticized for the drone stuff. And
droning people left and right.
Donald Trump was
fine with that.
Yeah, and increased it significantly, increased civilian deaths in the Middle East significantly.
By droning?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd have to see that, but you're right. It started under Obama, maybe Trump. Status quo, I guess, would say.
Well, increased it significantly.
Okay, I'd have to see that, but I'll take your word for it. But still, on the world stage, it was basically status quo, how things went, because nobody wanted Trump involved in their stuff because he's an erratic force. And same thing with NATO. NATO's like, we're not doing anything. And they're like, yeah, I think you're going to increase your stuff or we'll leave. And so the headline was Trump's going to leave NATO, when in reality it was NATO increases its spending. So he gets what he wants in that situation. Well, so my point is this.
Back to the Amazon thing, though. Well, like, what do you make of...
he wants them to fix it, deal with it themselves. Make a deal.
He is reportedly looking at appointing Heather McDowell to OSHA, who was
Republicans are
Amazon executive.
Republicans are notoriously, and I think you'll agree with this, less friendly to the organized labor front.
Well, I mean, OSHA is like...
I get it. I understand what you're
talking
about.
So why would he do that?
He's going to appoint people that understand the business and who are not going to use that agency to shut down innovation and things like that. And maybe...
Has OSHA been...
Hold on, no. Restrictions and things like that and pushing against what companies do to innovate, and for good reason. Sometimes people hurt and all these things. I will agree with that. But what I'm saying, I'm not saying they're going to let them like feed kids into the meat slicers and things like that. But what they're saying is, and this I think has been a general theme of Donald Trump, the regulation and the choke of the federal government's control and things, like what was it, the Chevron decision, where it said basically all these entities could just basically do whatever they want and interpret these laws however they want. Well, that's over. And a lot of people, I'm assuming you don't like that decision because it says basically do things by the letter of the law and stop interpreting things the way you want to. And
interestingly, Chevron was decided in favor of Reagan's EPA because they wanted latitude to kind of
but what happens
not enforce.
That was like 30 years ago, though, and I think the argument would be that the government has overreached.
Well, I mean, I think that the more kind of
he's pushing back against people that are going to overreach. That's what he's trying to do.
Well, I mean, I think on the Chevron thing, I think that the more illuminating dynamic to understand is that at the time that the conservative court agreed with Chevron, the president was conservative and he had control of the administration. And it looks like, Reagan kind of ushered in a similar dynamic to the New Deal.
Make up at that time?
I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. But what I'm saying, I don't know either. My point, I just want to know if you knew. But the simple fact is, this is an anti-regulation president. And again, when we say anti-regulation, I don't mean zero. It means less. And he's made it very clear. I mean, this decision last week where he said, hey, if you come and you put $100 billion into the country, we're going to fast track all of your
doesn't
stuff.
that just sound like favors for... Like, I thought,
Yes,
it was
exactly
it
what
was
it is.
small businesses, they have to pay all this.
Hold on. What he's saying is, and that was basically the argument, what he's saying is if you're going to come and put a bunch of people to work in America, we're going to make sure that it's not that you don't get any regulations or anything like that, but we're not going to
I think that is what he said.
No,
he said it's like no regulation.
That's not what he said.
Okay,
what he said is we're going to fast track the regulatory power that is used to slow these things down, and we're going to make sure that it gets handled quicker. He's not saying don't regulate and don't monitor and don't do any of these things. He said do it quickly. This thing shouldn't take forever, is what he's saying. So he's saying let's do it quicker. But yes, the interpretation was there are going to be no regulations if you give us $100 billion, and that's a little oversimplification of it. And
what do you make of the FTC?
What about it?
Federal Trade Commission.
No, I understand that. But what is it? No, that's not what I'm asking.
Well, I mean, J.D. Vance was making all these noises about I love Lena Khan. I'm a conservative. I think it was J.D. Vance that said that. Either it was him or Holly. Lena Khan has been doing banning non-competes, banning fake online reviews, capping the
where'd
cost
that
of
non-compete
inhalers
ban
to
go?
35.
Where'd it go? Where'd the ban on non-competes go? What happened?
It's been stalled in Trump's courts.
Right. Well, and again, but my point is, this is what happened with Trump in the first go round. He would try to do stuff, and then the courts would come in. Hell, it took them until earlier. Was it this year where they finally made the decision on the Dreamers that they're not protected? That thing's been going on for a decade. So you have all these things, but
so Lena Khan has been doing all these things, and it has like a cross-partisan appeal. And Donald Trump
non-competes is something I fully support because I'm under one.
Well, and capping the cost of inhalers to $35, blocked the Kroger-Albertsons merger, click to cancel subscriptions. Lots of really good stuff from the FTC. Supposedly, J.D. Vance supports it, and Donald Trump just appointed somebody to lead it that said he is going to reverse Lena Khan's anti-business agenda.
Well, I mean, let's go back to your freedom thing. Okay? Yeah. If you opt in to click to unsubscribe,
you're about to defend these.
I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to defend it. But what I'm going to say is, if I provide you a service,
right, and then you should have the freedom to make me climb up Mount Everest to end it.
To click an email.
Or to call somebody. I mean, that's the
whatever. That's their. Don't enter into a contract with Planet Fitness if going up there and canceling it is a pain in the ass.
Okay.
Chances are, if you sign up with Planet,
Defender.
I'm just making the point. Okay. If you sign up for Planet Fitness, you're probably a fat ass who needs to be up there anyway.
Sure.
So don't go up there and quit. Go up there and work out. That's what you should be doing.
Okay.
But yes.
So you think that Planet Fitness's freedom is more important than
you're not infringing on the people's freedom. They still have a right to cancel it. They just have to walk up and do it. They don't. There's no freedom to click an email and unsubscribe. And it's funny you say that because I've been traveling a lot, so I signed up for Planet Fitness, and I think I'm going to get dinged next month because I haven't canceled the thing yet.
Right.
But so I'm agreeing with you. But if you want to talk about freedom, you're telling these businesses what they can't do when they enter into open contracts with people. Just like my non-compete. I have a non-compete with my radio station. I had the freedom not to take that non-compete. I absolutely did, but I took it because that was the requirement for the job. Is that fair? Probably not. Would I like it to go away? Absolutely. I mean, there's no question about that. But at the same time, there's a reason why these non-competes exist in a larger sense. Are they overused? Absolutely. This bullshit that Biden was talking about where there's a non-compete so you don't work at a Taco Bell and go across the street and work at McDonald's, that's garbage. That's not a real thing.
What was a real thing?
And maybe there were some individual contractor or franchisees doing that, but that is not. I
don't think that's the common experience, but there's reporting about like Jimmy John's in particular was kind of notorious about it. They wouldn't
Do not sign a non-compete to work at Jimmy John's. Do sign a non-compete to work at a radio station where and look, and their reasoning is just on a broad sense. Their reason is they take Dale Jackson and they insert him in Huntsville, Alabama. Now it's up to me to make my name and do all these things, but I'm doing it on the back of WVNN and their history and Cumulus Broadcasting. And again, I'm anti non-compete because holy cow, it sucks. But at the same time, I understand the reasoning. Why should I be able to one day be like, I'm going over to the Rocket? Now, the Rocket listeners might be a little surprised to find me over there doing what I do, but there's no reason why I generally shouldn't be able to do that. I shouldn't want if they don't want me to do that, then they say, "Oh, please don't do that. We'll pay you more." Right? Like that would be the argument, and there would be free move. But you got to sign contracts and things like that. And non-compete. Why would you say word banned? I completely understand why they exist in some cases.
I'm sorry, we've gone a little long, and I still want to talk about the legislative session in Alabama. Are you?
I got plenty of time. Okay. I have to go take a picture with Santa Claus at about 5 o'clock.
Okay, yeah. So this will be we'll wrap up here in 20, 30 minutes because I do want to talk. I want. What are you expecting just generally from the legislative session?
Pain.
2025.
Pain. Yeah, no. I'm expecting a lot of things to get done. I'm expecting gambling to come up in a little form. I don't know what that's going to look like. You've got this thing with Anthony Daniels and his overtime tax cut. I think there's going to be a little debate over that. I think you're going to have probably for the first year a situation where it's going to be pretty tight on budgets, where there's not a bunch of federal dollars, where the economy's kind of slowed a little bit, so there might be some changes there. You're not going to see the same jumps that you've seen in funding and things like that. So I think there's going to be a lot of fighting going on. And on top of that, you've got all these social issues that are still dangling out there that, again, there are people who are like, hey, maybe you shouldn't put drag queens in schools. They're like, no, we should have drag queens in schools and libraries. And it's like, okay, well, now we're going to have to come in and do something about that. So you have that happening. So you have all those social issues, and you got an election. This is the last legislative session before you're in an election year.
The overtime tax cut, how it passed last year for folks who aren't in Alabama. Taxes on overtime wages have been eliminated at the state level, and that's kind of blown the budget of what they were thinking. Supposedly,
it was originally supposed to be $45 million. I think the first 9 months it was $240 million. So it's
how are you off by that much? That's kind of.
I asked that question, so I have the answer to that.
Okay, give me the answer.
When they did the analysis, the Legislative Resource Office said we have no way to know.
Oh, okay.
We have absolutely no way to know, so we are just shooting in the dark here.
We really don't know how many people work overtime.
Well, I mean,
in the state of Alabama?
I don't think they had the data that would tell them like this many people work overtime and things like this. So they've come up with the number now because it's on tax. You now have the exact number.
Right.
You'll see it. But I think people are disputing the original estimate, and people are disputing the numbers they have now. Because if you look at the numbers they have now, it's showing a lot of people working overtime that you probably would not. What they're saying is there are more people working overtime by the data than who are actually working overtime, and they're trying to figure out what that is. The numbers are messed up. That's the gist of that.
Yeah.
Anthony Daniels said he's got data that shows that not having this overtime has actually generated more revenue for the state than has gone out. That's sort of his analysis, and he says he has the data to back that up. The only person who's outwardly speaking out against an extension of this, because it ends in July or June or something like that, is State Senator Arthur Orr, a regular on my show, a good friend of mine, a guy who is over the Education Trust Fund, and he is very protective of that. There was a lot of discussion about school choice and how much that was going to cost and all these other things. And I think he's raising that question, but he seems to be a man on an island by himself. At least,
so you don't think that it doesn't get extended?
Who are the pro tax increase people in Alabama?
Well, that's what I'm asking. I mean, Orr's trying to whip up the storm, and he's pretty influential in Montgomery. So
right.
I didn't know.
Right.
I think, is that what you're hearing? Is that he's off on an island?
I talked to both of those gentlemen today.
Yeah.
And what I heard is basically Orr saying the numbers are messed up. We got to figure out what the actual numbers are, and we need to have a real conversation about whether this is the right way to do this, whether we should come up with some other kind of tax cut that spreads that out amongst people across the board, not just people who are working overtime, against the people who said, hey, look, they're putting more money in these people's pockets. More people are working overtime because of it, and this is a good thing overall. And if Anthony Daniels can make the argument that it's a net positive for the state financially, then he'll win. But I've said this on the radio, if you let this expire, you're raising taxes because you are. I mean, that's just the way it is. So you have, and it's funny because you have Anthony Daniels, the House Minority Leader, a Democrat, and Donald Trump, a Republican president, at the same point. They're both talking about.
Has he weighed in? Trump has weighed in on this overtime thing.
Tips, no tax on overtime.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So he's made not on,
but
Alabama,
not in Alabama.
Not in
okay,
Alabama
that's what I was like. Oh,
but I mean,
just generally, they're talking about similar things.
Get someone to ask him the question. Find someone that asks Donald Trump that question. What's he going to say? He's going to say, "I love the idea." That's what he's going to say. So now if you're going to be a Republican and you're going to vote to not extend this.
So
you're going against Donald Trump as well. And look, doing nothing is a tax increase. That's how it's going to be framed. I'm a talk radio host, conservative talk radio host in Alabama. If you do not if you do not extend this, you're raising taxes.
So, if there is if you know they look at the numbers and they figure out that there is genuinely like a concerning level of depletion from the Education Trust Fund, is there any potential that rather than removing this tax cut that does kind of definitionally go to workers, you see a rollback of the kind of quote unquote school choice stuff, which is also depleting from the Education Trust Fund?
It's $100 million the first year.
Right, but there's no cap
out of a $10 million budget. I know, and I said numerous times on my show, make me the cap. I said, look at my wife and my income, take it and say that's. I already sent my kid to a private school. I said, cap it there. I said, put it $1 below what we make. Make that the case. I don't need the help. I really don't. And so, and then the people that are already having their kids in private school, I think that there should be like a phase in for them. I'm not saying they shouldn't get it. I mean, they pay taxes just like everyone else. They pay more taxes than everyone else. Generally, if you're sending your kid to a private school, chances are you're making more money. Here's things like this. So I'm against cutting them out of this just because of that. But at the same time, I think that the fight on school choice is so fraught and so tenacious or so contentious that once you get it, you don't go back. There will be no going back. It will only go forward from here on out. And so, like, basically what you're going to have to do on the left here is hold the line and say this is the end of it. And I don't think that's going to win, because the argument is stop attacking the people that want school choice. Start touting the public schools. Tell me about that. Tell me about your successes in the public school. You got 37% of the kids in Huntsville can read and 90% of them are graduating. Go ahead.
Where is that?
Go look at it. The reading at grade level. 37% of the kids in Huntsville city schools are reading at grade level, and 90+% are graduating.
Huh.
I mean, just think about that. I mean, go ahead, defend the public school system. You know, and a lot of that, I mean, I hate to say this, but if we want to talk about public schools in general, this is my thought. You could take every kid out of the best school in the state and take him and put him in the worst school in the state, and that kid's still going to succeed. And you could take every kid out of the worst school in the state and put him in the best school in the state, and that kid's still going to fail, because it is about parents.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. And I hate to say this, because if you agree with that...
Well, I mean...
Hold on. Do you agree with this? So now I'm going to make you sit. Sure. Now I'm going to imply you said something terrible. So basically what you're saying is teachers don't matter. And in the large sense of things is that... And I don't believe that, but that is essentially the gist of this. Are there individual teachers that can make a difference? Absolutely. No question about it. There are. And they do every day. It's a job that is hard. My mom was a teacher. I understand it. But... the simple fact of the matter is, by the time they get to kindergarten, you can already track the path. You can already see. I'm not saying you can't deviate or fall off from that path, but what you have is a bunch of people who, you know, there have been papers written that if you're reading to your kids, you're giving them an unfair advantage. Like that. That's kind of like the insane position here. So I don't know why you hate teachers all of a sudden. But
right. No, I think there's a lot of, you know. You would say parents. I would say, you know, socioeconomic status or something like
that. Those are
right?
the same thing, but you're just using extra words.
Yeah. So the other things that might be up on the agenda. There's are you familiar with Jobs to Move America?
What now?
Jobs to Move America.
I do not.
Jobs to Move America is like a labor-affiliated nonprofit. They were really instrumental in getting a community benefits agreement at New Flyer in Anniston, which contained positive neutrality in a union election, and they unionized with the Communication Workers of America, CWA, their industrial division. They got a new contract and everything, and so they're pretty... You know, they're making moves in Alabama, and they have like a legislative agenda for 2025, and they're really, really leaning on SB 231 as a model. And so SB 231, for those of you who don't remember or you're not from Alabama, it was the bill that was backed by Senator Orr, that would revoke economic incentives from companies that voluntarily recognize their workers' unions. Yep. And so JMA is saying, okay, you know, bet. If we want to start putting strings,
Did they say bet? Is that like
that's in the press release.
Okay. Bet. First line, bet.
So, they're saying, look, if we want to start attaching strings to our incentives, let's do that. Let's say if you violate our child labor laws, we take away your incentives. Let's say if you don't have pro-family working conditions, then let's take away your...
What's pro-family working condition?
What they define that as...
paternity leave, all these other things.
Yeah, paternity leave, no mandatory overtime, things like that.
It sounds good on for a press release, but I'm not so sure you're going to get much traction with that.
So why are they willing to revoke?
What'd you bring up earlier? Freedom. What'd you bring up earlier? You said freedom.
So the employer has. We want to make sure that in Alabama, the
employee and the employer have freedom in this situation.
No.
Enter into the conversation.
We want to make sure that in Alabama, the employer has the freedom to not give to mandate,
not be forced to give benefits.
To mandate as a condition of employment working more than 40 hours in a week. We want to make sure that they have the freedom to do that. But we don't want to have them to give them the freedom to voluntarily recognize their workers' union.
Yes.
Okay, so that's not
what they're saying, because that is connected to state resources going to that business. So you can not understand this if you want, but it's pretty obvious. What is the reason of the economic incentives? The reason of the economic incentive is to make this state more friendly to employers that will come in and pay salaries to people and pay payroll tax and increase property values and all these other things. That's the goal of that. And their logic, their belief is, and I know you disagree with this, is if they bring them in here and they all unionize, then no one else is going to come here. And you know why they say that? Because businesses have said that. They have made that clear.
That's what. I'm not talking about that, but you just said, I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on what freedoms we were and were not allowing businesses to have.
Hold on. But when you're taking something, that's part of the deal. Mm-hmm. When you take resources,
that's exactly, and Jobs to America and also me are saying that
the state
we should
legislature is
have.
going to say no, thanks, we don't want a part of that deal. That's what they're going to say. But these individuals who take this, I think you'd have a hard time.
What about the child labor?
Hold on. I did a perfect world. Sure, I'm fine with that. I have no problem.
Perfect world.
No, I'm telling you, I agree with you.
Okay.
But when you tie it to all these other things,
it's each of these are a separate bill. They're going to be a separate bill.
Putting up one bill that says child labor laws. If you violate labor laws, we'll take it. Fine.
SB 22, sponsored by Senator Marika Coleman.
I support it. If they violate child labor laws,
I know that you're going to say you support it, but is it going to pass in Montgomery?
I don't think it will end up just like that. I think things will change on these things, and you're going to have a hard time getting 20 of these things up on the floor and things like that. And they're probably
the child labor one is the one that they're going to
because they're going to try to use that as sort of a battering ram to get through the door and go from there. So maybe for tactical reasons, they'll push that aside. I don't agree. I don't disagree with the premise that you're creating here on that particular issue. That said, the goal here is for the state government to make this as an appealing place as possible for businesses to come. And the whole child labor thing, you can look at all these different cases around the state. Some of them, majority of them are illegal immigrants and people doing things that are nefarious on the managerial level. To suggest that Volvo or whoever, or Hyundai or whoever is at the top in Korea is saying, hey, let's employ some Mexicans who are 13 in a plant in wherever, Alabama. I just don't foresee that happening. So do you hold the entire corporation responsible for the mismanagement deeds of the individual manager on the local level? How high does it go? What's the requirement? You could ask all these questions. But in theory, yes, I agree with you. But in practice, what does that look like? And we're just talking about the child labor, one of those. But again, back to the purpose. What is the purpose that you want to create a business-friendly environment? More tax revenue, more jobs for your citizens. And I think that's worked. You've lived here for a long time, Jacob, in North Alabama. I've lived here 17 years. All these different companies, starting with Toyota Mazda now, Polaris,
starting
Amazon,
with Mercedes.
Well, I'm talking about just in North Alabama, but yes, you're right. But Mercedes is the one that started for the whole state. And now in North Alabama, a lot of it's been centralized here, and we've seen it. But it's changed things significantly for the better for the citizenry of Alabama. Now, yes, people have come in for jobs, but people in Alabama picked up a vast majority of those jobs. Lives are better for Alabamians because of this. Child labor law should be enforced as is. There's no question about it. Put the people in jail who are violating those laws. But if you're going to say, let's tie them to the incentives, and the companies say, well, I can't manage the guy on the lower level who's using a temp agency to hire an illegal immigrant, and that illegal immigrant, tell me if this is wrong, gets into an underage illegal immigrant, gets into a relationship with another illegal immigrant that's working at the facility and then runs away, and that's how they find. That's what happened. The one you're talking about, right? That's a factual situation. Yeah. So, but is that the fault of the guy in Korea who worked the deal for the incentive? No. So how do you punish the company for that?
Well, I mean, because they're setting up and they're setting up the environment.
Allow it, I guess.
And encouraging.
But you're punishing encouraging is a strong word.
They're
here.
using these temp companies,
but that's a local decision.
They know that the local decision to use these
it's pushed up on them. I get it. Like they put the pressure on them to do these things and hire the workers, and they don't care where the workers come from. Is what the argument is. But what I'm saying to you is, if you put this qualification on this, you're going to have people go to states that don't have those qualifications, and you're not going to solve the problem you're trying to solve. Okay, and all you're doing is handicapping yourself. So why would you do that? So, I mean, just a tactical conversation that you have to have with legislators about that.
So, well, maybe we'll be able to get some of them on the show to tell us that they can talk to us about how they think it's important to be
pro-child labor. Yes,
Hyundai has the freedom to.
I like that framing because I mean it's as disingenuous as possible, but also correct. Like again, just like the 80-20 thing, it's as disingenuous as possible, but it's technically correct because it hides the entire reality of the situation.
It reveals the reality.
It hides the reality. It hides it.
Okay. All right. Well, as we're wrapping up, the last thing, you always like to bring up that something I can't even remember what I said about the cops.
Burning cop cars.
Burning cop cars.
Sometimes cops cars gotta burn.
Sometimes it happens. It's like physics.
Okay, so here's if you want me to bring something. Okay, so I like to joke about this with Jacob because one day on the radio he was hosting a show and there was I believe they had just had the run-in in downtown Huntsville where cops shot rubber bullets at people, and I was down there. Were you there when that was going down?
I was. Yeah.
I was down there when that was happening. I was like, man, this is awesome. That's what I was thinking when this whole thing was going on. But I could definitely understand the situation. Anyway, the next day or that Saturday, you said something flippantly along the lines of burning cop cars is not necessarily violence.
Oh, well, that's true. It's property destruction.
Right. But again, it's correct, but it's incredibly disingenuous.
Well, it's like
nobody's just walking up and like taking two sticks and rubbing them together and starting a cop car on fire. No, they're fighting with cops. They're doing all these things, and a cop car is exploding. And so, yes, I do like to give you a hard time.
Okay, yeah. And so just
give me the explanation.
Yeah. Well, it's just an explanation that it's property destruction. Property destruction is distinct from, inflicting violence on a person.
So if I burn down an entire office building where there's nobody in the building at the time.
Well, that's not violent.
As a riot's going on, I'm burning down an office building. You can isolate that moment and say, well, that's not a violent act.
I think in most situations it wouldn't be clear if there were people there, and so it would be kind of violent by implication. But you can tell if somebody's in a cop car or not, and so like I don't know that I can't even remember which one. I think it was Minneapolis or something that there was a cop car that was burning, and I was like, I'm not like
that was the summer of love. There were cop cars everywhere burning.
Yeah, so. I'm not burnt up about it.
Yeah.
But so you would have been opposed to like the Boston Tea Party and the American Revolution and stuff. Right.
I don't think I would have been opposed to them actually fighting back against real tyranny. But there's no real tyranny here. They were mad. Okay, you want to get into the George Floyd conversation? George Floyd is like the worst possible person you could use in that situation.
Well,
now,
I mean, it wasn't his choice, right?
Kneeling, well, he went in and passed the fake $20 bill. He took the fentanyl before. He did all the things that actually led to his death. But you shouldn't kneel on somebody's neck.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't do it for a long period of time. And you shouldn't do it after they're conscious or unconscious. You shouldn't do that sort of thing. So I'm with you on that. But also the premise that happened, therefore the whole system is racist and out of control. Not only is it incorrect, but what was the end result of this? Property damage and death. Where? Amongst cops? Some.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it was death amongst African Americans. It was death. It was destruction in neighborhoods where African American businesses and families live, and you have all this stuff. And I'll tell you, just from a political standpoint, it's a severely weakening position for liberals to take that. These people yelling and screaming in the street, yes, they're with us, but we're kind of against how far they've gone. And I don't think that's really a tenable situation to continue, because you can't support what they're doing and say, no, I was fine with them burning the building down, but when they punch the cop, that's when I draw the line.
Yeah, well, I also don't think that saying that it's different, just making sure that we have a distinction between people hurting people and people, destroying property. It's not even necessarily an endorsement of the property destruction. It's just a recognition that it's different and that it's not as bad.
Okay, have you taken a position on the Luigi Mangione thing?
It shouldn't have happened. I actually haven't talked about it on the air yet, but answer
this question without saying but.
Well, yeah, it shouldn't have happened. I shouldn't have done it.
Okay. I hear a lot of people on your side who say, "Oh my God, it's the worst thing ever," but it's the outrage of the masses and something.
Well, that seems to be. That's also true too.
Well,
right?
Okay, there it is. And I just wonder. The reason I asked that question is because it's like, again, if you look at the poll numbers. The poll numbers show, like, amongst young people, like 40% support him. Older people, 70% hate him.
Well, and
Twitter's not real life. I mean, that's sort of the thing. Like,
I also think that.
I'm sorry.
40% of young people told pollsters that they supported it.
It was actually. I got the number wrong. Hold on. It was 16% said they approved it. Only 40% said they disapproved. So there was less than 50% said they disapproved. There was a lot of, who's that? But only 16%.
I think among young people, 41% said they approved of Luigi Mangione.
Oh, you're right. 16% of Americans approved. And you're right.
Yeah, 40% of young people told a pollster that they approved it.
Yeah, it's just an insane.
Okay, so that's something that you like to throw in as kind of a drive-by. Rush Limbaugh likes the drive-by media. So whenever we talk, I think I've finally got my drive-by.
Oh, I can't wait.
So I think my drive-by for you is, that I'm trying to figure out still how I'm going to phrase it, but I'll be able to say something about how, your mom chastised you for abusing women or something like that.
What?
I think that's what I'll be able to say.
To me?
Yeah.
My mom never once chastised me.
Well, that was not what your tweet implied when you were talking about the Pete Hegseth situation.
When I said that sounds like my mom,
yeah.
What I meant. That's actually really funny.
See, isn't it? So the.
Let me explain.
Okay.
So Pete Hegseth there was something out about the news story and said his mom said all these things about abusing women and things like this,
and you were like, women are irrational, and I have a mom too. And it's like, okay, Dale, my mom has never gotten. I've gone through a divorce. My mom never wrote me a sternly.
I never got
about abusing women. But that was clearly the implication from your tweet.
But watch this. Now I'm going to address it directly and not try to bullshit. My mother never sent me anything like that. The point I was making, and it was kind of tongue in cheek, is that women are emotional. That was sort of and my mother's emotional. That was the joke about it. But it was not that my mother wrote me an email about abusing women, because never have done that. And so no, but that's actually good. That's good. I thought maybe you'd go with state seal. Like, yes, I thought you would hit me on like my multiple felonies that people claim that I've committed and stuff. But that'll get you a defamation charge.
Yeah, well, no.
A defamation lawsuit, so you better watch out on that one.
All right. Well, Dale, went a little longer. Figured we'd go for an hour. Gone about an hour and a half, but I appreciate it. And hopefully you're wrong about some of the legislative stuff. I mean, Jobs to Move America seem pretty bullish about the child labor thing. They think that...
Well, what are they going to do, Jacob? They're going to come in and be like, we'll never get this done. Definitely don't give us any money and donate to us to push this stuff.
Well... Supposedly, I think that there's support among Republicans for it.
Again, if you frame it in that one sense, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the question then becomes, what's the ripple effect of such a thing? I'm for it. People should not violate child labor laws.
All right.
It's a bold position, but I'm going to stand by that position.
All right.
No buts there. I stand by it completely.
Dale Jackson from The Dale Jackson Show on WVNN and other places in Birmingham and now Chattanooga, too? Are you also on Chattanooga?
No.
Were you going to be for a second?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'm in Birmingham on Talk 99.5. I'm in Montgomery on News Radio 1440. I am on various different places on my TV show, Alabama Politics This Week. But no, I'm Alabama. You're not going to see me roaming around.
I thought Yaffe's on in Chattanooga.
Yeah, he does a show in Chattanooga too.
Okay.
So yeah,
maybe did you just fill in for him one day?
Okay. I had filled in for him a couple times.
All right. Well, thanks for coming to the studio, even though you were concerned a little bit that you were going to end up Brian Thompson.
You made the invite was like, come down to the studio, don't say a word, knock on a side door and come in. I'm like, okay, this is like a trap. I'm coming here. It's like a dungeon.
Come into the basement.
Yeah, but luckily it's safe. Yeah. I would love to do it again. I had a good time, and I appreciate you having me.
All right, man. Appreciate it. Talk soon. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.